Welcome back to Washington Commanders Insider. Today, we're talking about an update around Tre Hendrickson. We're going to be talking about if the Washington Commanders should still be looking to trade for him. Next, we're going to be talking about what the Washington Commanders can do to upgrade the edge rusher position via free agency. And so before we go ahead and jump into it, I first want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, just like Jaden Daniels is going to be hitting Terry McLaurin for multiple touchdowns this upcoming season. And so in exchange for hitting that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Washington Commanders. And so make sure you hit that subscribe, you hit that like button, and you join the Washington Commanders Insider family as we talk nothing but Washington Commanders football daily. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the content for today. And so look, you can find this article on Commanders Wire. And so within this article is a tweet from an NFL insider with The Athletic. And they're giving an update here with Tre Hendrickson. And it certainly looks like that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to get something done with Tre Hendrickson. And so here is that tweet. Once again, you can go to Commanders Wire to get the link to this. But says, I did a little digging on it, and I'm still getting really good vibes coming out of Cincy that they're going to try to get a deal done with Tre Hendrickson. And so you see, once again, this is an NFL insider there. And so look, based off this tweet, I must say that I'm not surprised. And I do think that the bottom line here is that the Cincinnati Bengals want Tre Hendrickson, and Tre Hendrickson wants to be with the Cincinnati Bengals. If I could just put a guess out there, I think a deal does get done. And I think it gets done probably in training camp. I think that that's going to be the situation here with Tre Hendrickson. I think that they're probably waiting until the last minute to get him on the field. It could even take till week 1 to get it done. But I think that he's really off the market. I don't think that there is anything that the Cincinnati Bengals necessarily want or are entertaining to get Tre Hendrickson. And I think for the Washington Commanders, it's best served that they focus with what they have on the team and then going out and upgrading the edge rusher position via free agency for right now. And I think that the Washington Commanders, by doing so, I think that you just now put that energy into the players that are here, which I think we're in a good situation. I think we're in a better situation maybe than we were last year. And talking about these free agents that the Washington Commanders could go ahead and take a chance on, I think that you actually could get the same type of production just in a different way. And I also think for Adam Peters, I think for what the Cincinnati Bengals want, which is probably going to be a first-round pick, it's probably just not worth it right now at this time. And so, with that being said, let's shift focus and let's look over here at the edge rusher options that the Washington Commanders have. And so let's start in free agency. And so, with free agency, I think that the first player that the Washington Commanders should absolutely consider, just going back to this, would be Von Miller. And so this is an article here on Commanders Wire. So we're going to be looking at some of the stats that were mentioned here. But I think that Von Miller certainly is the first player that you probably have to consider, especially if you're looking for a rotational player. And so, look, 279 snaps. 209 of those were pass rushing situations. And so, again, that was in that Commanders Wire article that we just saw. And so that suggests that this is very much a situational player. And so what I like about Von Miller is that he, again, has won 2 Super Bowls and he's been a Super Bowl MVP. So you're bringing a player in that has tons of experience, that has definitely competed at the highest level, that all fits in with what the Washington Commanders want to do. And I just think at this point in time, in his career, with what he has around him defensively with the Washington Commanders, I think that Von Miller really could have a very good year if the Washington Commanders went out and signed him, because I do like the fact that he had 6 sacks last season. I think it's something that could go up with the Washington Commanders. He also had 17 total tackles as well. And so, again, you're getting Von Miller to be a situational pass rusher. And so I think that that is option number 1 if you're going out in free agency. Next, the next player that the Washington Commanders could go out and get would be Za'Darius Smith. Now, so here's the deal with Zidarius Smith. And so, again, going into that Commanders Wire article, he's more of a guy that is going to be a full-time starter for you. I think he could compete for that because 615 total snaps, 421 pass rushing situations. And so out of those snaps, 421 pass rushing, 178 of those was run defense, and he had 68 pressures. And so a lot more snaps than Von Miller. Once again, that's in that Commanders Wire article. And so I like this because if you're going to get Za'Darius Smith, you're getting a player that you're thinking is going to be a full-time starter. And his production, it's been there over the last couple seasons, and he's much younger than Von Miller. And so that's another key aspect here if you're getting Za'Darius Smith. And so just his production last season, he had 8 sacks with Cleveland. Then he had 4 with the Detroit Lions. The season before, he had 5.5. The season after or before that with Minnesota, he had 10. He had 0 with Green Bay. Then he had 12.5, 13.5. So he's really had some good production as a sack getter here in the NFL. And so I like him if you're looking to get maybe a full-time starter here. And again, if you're getting him on a one-year rental type of situation, I love it because this kind of fits into, I think, what Adam Peters likes to do with the one-year deals. And it's one of those deals where you have a ton of upside with the deal. And so you get him into the building, and I think that he gets to the upside. I also think that Von Miller is another player that could get to the upside. Lastly, the next player that I think the Washington Commanders should strongly consider would be Matthew Judon. And so I think a lot of people probably shy away from Matthew Judon because he really maybe has taken a step back since I believe he had the torn pec muscle, but still 5.5 sacks with Atlanta. This last season, he had 4 with the New England Patriots in 2023, but he had 15.5 in 2022 and 12.5 in 2021. And I'm not saying that he's necessarily going to get back to that type of production of the 15.5 and the 12.5 sacks, but I think that this is a player that certainly could be anywhere in between, I'd say 6 to maybe 9 sacks. I think that Matthew Judon could do that. And so remember, with Dante Fowler, he had 10.5 sacks for his last season. And so I think, look, you get him into the building, you get him into a rotational type of situation. I think that he could really excel. And what I like about Matthew Judon is that he's coming to a winning situation. And so I think that that will really give him some more juice. And I talked about this before just a couple of videos ago that I think that once you get a player that has been on some teams that just haven't won, you get them into the building, with some players that have had some real success in this league. I think that that's like an added bonus, and I think it's a stat that you just really can't count for. It doesn't show up on a stat sheet. You can't find it on the paper, but I do think that that gives Matthew Judon some juice, and so that's why I think, again, it fits really what Adam Peters would want to do and that's just an upside deal. And so next, I want to talk a little bit more about what the Washington Commanders have on the team, that if they don't go out and they go get a free agency or go get a free agent like Matthew Judon, Von Miller, or Za'Darius Smith, I think with what we have, we really have some good pieces here because with the signings that the Washington Commanders went out and got, when you're talking about Dietrich Weiss, I like him a lot. He had 5 sacks last season. This is a guy that has Super Bowl experience, and so I think that he is going to be very huge for us. And then also, too, with Jacob Martin, he's definitely a situational player. So I know he had 3 sacks last year, but that's what he is. I mean, he's a pass rusher coming off the edge. He's going to be a situational type of guy for us. And again, I think between these two players, if the Washington Commanders didn't go out and get an edge rusher via free agency, I think we would still be fine. And I think we're going to see an added bonus to our defense this year, even though it doesn't seem like it necessarily on paper. I do think that it's going to happen for the Washington Commanders. And so lastly, another thing to consider with the Washington Commanders and really making a move for the edge rusher position is you got to think about the Washington Commanders could wait until after preseason, because I think that when you're, just looking across the league, everybody's got to get down to 53, a 53-man roster. There's going to be some cuts that are made due to salary cap. There's going to be some cuts made maybe due to just some performances. Maybe there's some players that step up. Maybe some teams step away from some of these veteran players that are edge rushers. And so, look, I don't think the Washington Commanders should go out, trade some draft capital for Tre Hendrickson, because I think that Cincy's going to want a little bit too much. And then I think with these, 1-year deals with Von Miller, Matthew Judon, and Za'Darius Smith, that seems like a good option. But if you want to wait till, after preseason, I think maybe you could get something even better there. You get somebody that, look, they've played some good football. Just the situation didn't work out with that team due to a salary cap situation, or maybe another player just stepped up in preseason. And also an added bonus to that is the Washington Commanders get some more tape on some players. And so maybe there's some players out there that were some undrafted free agents or something like that, that they, play well in the preseason. Maybe the team just, leaves them off of the roster, and the Commanders can swoop in and maybe get an edge rusher that they can develop. And so those are some ways I think in which the Washington Commanders could get better at the edge position. And so anyway, let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you feel like the Washington Commanders would be better served upgrading the edge position via free agency? We talked about Zidarius Smith. We talked about Von Miller. We talked about Matthew Judon. We just talked about maybe the Washington Commanders wait till after the preseason and see what cuts are made. Maybe they can get an undrafted free agent and turn that into some gold. So that's a possibility. And then next, look, the Washington Commanders, look, they still very much could try to throw their name out there in the hat to trade for Tre Hendrickson, but I don't think that it's happening. And I think that, the report that we saw, it kind of goes just into what we've been hearing about Tre Hendrickson, and that is that, Cincinnati is trying to maximize the window that they have with, Joe Burrow, and with what they have just signed with their, wide receivers and things like that. And so Tre Hendrickson, I think, is with Cincinnati. I feel like that the Washington Commanders should just focus on what they have, and they still could maybe make something happen at the trade deadline, because remember, they made the trade for Marshawn Lattimore. So, I think that that's still something that's very much on the table as well for the Washington Commanders, if they see something at the trade deadline that can help them get over the hump towards the end of the season. And so anyway, let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. And as we always say, go Commanders, and I will see you on the next one. All right, peace.